would want to go blind? Who would want to, not be able to smell or taste? And, if we could do something to prevent that, we would. But why then are we not doing something to protect ourselves from going deaf, which, again, we all know is an issue and is something that's happening to us.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Raving Patients Podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Dr. Len Tao, and this episode is sponsored by Cloud Dentistry and DocSites. Thank you to the sponsors. So I became a new member of Catapult Education during in the last 6 months, and we had our annual retreat in Phoenix, Arizona in February. And I was able to sit down and meet with some amazing doctors, amazing lecturers, amazing people. And one of those people I wanted to have on the podcast today. So we are going to be talking about a number of different things. The title of the episode is The Silent Killers Within Dentistry. And we're going to be talking about a number of topics related to hearing loss in dentistry. We're going to talk about student loans, patients' acceptance to treatments, and his book that he wrote called The Financial Survival Guide for Dentists. So please welcome to the Raving Patients Podcast, Sam Shamardi. Sam, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Great to be on. Appreciate it. And yeah, it was great to connect with you and obviously so many others at the retreat, but learning about what you do and with the podcast, appreciate you having me on.
Well, I'm excited to finally get you on here to talk about some of the things we wanted to talk about today. Let's start off with a brief bio or a brief introduction about you, what you do. You have a unique kind of career in the sense that you don't have a physical practice. You kind of are a traveling periodontist. But give a brief background of what you do, what you've done or what you're doing for dentists and kind of your background.
Yeah, I think, from the dental standpoint, like you mentioned, first and foremost, obviously I'm a periodontist. I am practicing in the Boston area. I grew up in Southern California, came out to the Boston area for dental school, liked it out here, believe it or not. I know it's a shock for some people. Went to Philadelphia for my residency at UPenn and basically kind of missed the Boston vibe in the city and have been practicing out here over the last 10, 12 years, 12 years actually by now. So, but, a lot of other interests, like you said, I've always been interested in teaching, giving back, the academia side of things. So I've been fortunate enough to be faculty with the perio department at Harvard for really pretty much going on 11, 12 years as well. So I love doing that. Obviously do that on a part-time basis, given practice being, full-time for the rest. But really, and part of the topic for what we're going to discuss, just really wanted to highlight things in dentistry that I thought were really significant issues that nobody really talks about. I think it's always popular to talk about new software and new technology and, the 80th iteration of a composite. But, two topics that really kind of grinded at me when I started practicing. One was the issue of hearing loss, just looking at the environment we were in, how loud it was, how aggravating it was, and starting to try and connect the dots as to, why all of our colleagues that have been practicing for a while are complaining of not being able to hear well, and why are we in this environment that's just so aggravating with the noise. And you look at all the requirements on us with gloves and masks, and now obviously post-COVID, we all had to force ourselves against our own desire to get accustomed to N95s. So, we've kind of evolved and adapted all these different things, but we never have done anything to address our hearing. So that's kind of one aspect. And then the other, as a new grad, and, now I've been out 12 years and, the number one thing amongst my old dental school classmates, we're having our 15-year reunion next month. And, the number one complaint everybody always talks about is the lack of education from the financial side of things. We graduate hundreds of thousands in debt. We have no idea how to kind of really set up our foundation financially to start our careers, how to go about buying an office, what's a write-off, what's a corporation, just the whole A to Z. So that was kind of another thing that I thought we always have this complaint. We were never really properly, educated on that in dental school. So, what can I do to help address that? And that's kind of what brought about the whole book project, which we'll talk about. So that's kind of my background.
Well, that's great. And I'm excited to hear more about, you don't hear much about hearing loss I always joke around that I have a great memory, I have great hearing. And I always say I have selective hearing with my wife. When she talks, I kind of don't hear her very well.
Exactly.
So that's just one of those things that I like to joke around about. But I'm really excited to hear more about the hearing loss in dental because I know it's a problem. And obviously the financial aspect of things, which is obviously a problem for a ton of new graduating dentists because they leave school with so much debt. It's like having a mortgage without a house. And that's a big nut to have before you even get out in the real world to figure out what you're doing in your career. So let's talk about, we'll start with hearing loss. Why don't you kind of give the listeners and the viewers, because this is being recorded and it's a video podcast as well, why don't you kind of give them some details about this problem in the dental space?
Yeah. So, I think everybody can connect the dots in terms of, appreciating the fact that the equipment we use, the high-speed handpiece, the, air turbines, ultrasonics, all the lab equipment, basically everything we use in the dental office, I think we can all agree that it's loud. It's aggravating. Everybody can think of that sound of a high-speed suction, catching the patient's tongue and the shriek it makes. But again, I think none of us really prior put two and two together in terms of the fact that you get exposed to that for a long enough period of time, and it can really cause damage. And, part of the connection or the disconnect, I should say, is, we all associate things with age and time. So everybody appreciates and thinks, all right, well, as I age and I turn 40, 50, 60, 70, all right, my hair might gray. And that's just kind of normal. But people don't realize that when it goes to your hearing, there's no reason why any of your hearing has to be damaged or has to get worse with time. It's completely 100% preventable. But again, we just don't realize that that's the case and that something can be done to protect it. So that's kind of the source of the problem. And, the specific issue that affects us as dental professionals is something called noise-induced hearing loss. And it's crazy because once I started doing the research on it, I realized that in the dental literature, there's literally about 6 or 7 decades worth of articles that are out there warning us about the problem and preaching to us to do something about it. You look at the medical literature, and it's even more frightening to see the actual systemic health issues that high exposure to noise does to us, not just in terms of hypertension and all different types of cardiac issues, but also endocrine disruption. Obviously, what it does to our sleep or lack thereof. Imagine being exposed to noise. And it should make sense. We see these films of these torture chambers, and what are they doing? Where they're blasting music. They're creating environments where people are exposed to noise for such a long period of time that the level of stress and aggravation and what it does to you, mentally and physically, it's a form of torture, literally. So, you think about us, and as dental professionals, noise-induced hearing loss is a problem of high exposure to noise, but a cumulative problem over a long period of time. And of course, the average dentist, our careers are 35 years and obviously just rising. And then you think about the noise we're exposed to, not just even out of the office, which we'll get into, but just the noise we're in our daily 9 to 5, you start putting two and two together in terms of the hours and then 35 years. Well, we're literally like the eye of the storm in terms of risk of why this is such a big issue.
So talk about the solution to the problem, which I think was the product you have was called Ear Aid. Is that correct? So talk about this, how you solve the problem with the solution that you came up with.
Yeah, no, great question. So, going about the process of trying to find a solution, I started this back in 2014. So I've really been involved with this in depth for now going on 8 years. And basically the solution part, there's a couple tricks to it. First, the first thing we all think about is, well, why don't we just stick foam in our ears and there you go. But, we all know that's obvious, but how come none of us all these years have ever done it? And the simple answer to that is you stick foam in your ears and you basically cut yourself off from the world. It's your sounds are completely muffled. You're no longer able to communicate with your patients and staff. It's a bad look if a patient's trying to speak with you and you can't speak back. So that automatically rules out earplugs. And I think for the average dental professional, if anybody at some point thought about this issue and thought, well, heck, maybe I should do something. Well, right away they wrote it off because they're like, well, I can't put foam in my ears for that exact reason. So it was a matter of when I started doing the research, seeing, well, what else actually exists out there? And I came across two different solutions. The one layer, the kind of the top layer, is something called passive hearing protection. So I think if people were to look at some stuff out on the market, even some ones that you'll see advertised for dentists, what you always find is that they're basically, ear molds that you can even get them custom fit for your ear. But basically, it's a filter that's placed within that ear mold. And based on the strength of that filter you have, it might be 15 decibels, it might be 20 decibels, and I'll explain some of the decibel stuff in a bit. But bottom line is that filter will bring those, sounds that you're exposed to down to a lower level based on the strength of that filter, which is great because it is offering you protection. So definitely compared to wearing nothing, it's a big step in the positive direction. The problem I ran into and the problem we have with the passive protection is that it's lowering everything down across the board. So, you might want to lower the sound of that high-speed handpiece, but our conversation, for example, that we're having right now, and imagine that's the conversation you're having with your patient, you don't want that to be lowered. So even though you're getting protection, you're still not really targeting what you actually want to have protected and what you actually want to have lowered versus not. And that's where doing the research, it really brought me across, the ultimate level, which is called active hearing protection. And what differentiates active versus passive is that you actually think of a smart plug. There is a electronic circuit. There's actually a high-tech electronic circuit within that plug. And what exactly that means for us is that when you are wearing this earplug, so imagine you have an earplug, your ear is completely sealed. So your sound should be muffled. You shouldn't be able to hear things. You should be cut off from the world. But by utilizing this active protection, even though your ear is sealed, our conversation we're having right now is heard 100% HD. So you hear everything the same as you are right now with nothing in your ears, which by itself, from a tech standpoint, is pretty crazy. It's awesome. So what that technology is doing is that it recognizes that our normal conversation noise is not in a decibel or frequency range that's going to cause any kind of hearing damage. So it will allow that to pass through completely untouched. However, the moment that there's any kind of sound that is in that frequency or decibel range that will cause hearing damage, aka everything we work in the dental environment, our high speed, our suction, our ultrasonics, whatever it might be, it is actually able to instantaneously recognize, isolate, and then compress or lower that sound down to the decibel based on the circuitry, which for my product is 15 decibels. And that came based off of the science and the literature that was out there based on what would be the ideal amount of protection. So you're able to take that sound of the high speed and bring it down 15 decibels. And by doing that, not only clinically are you not getting that aggravation, but your ears are not getting that high decibel exposure and it's not getting damaged. So, you're no longer going to damage your hearing, even if you're running your high speed the entire 8 hours you're sitting at the office. So you go from a place of damage to an area of instant protection without compromising your ability to communicate regularly with your patients and your staff or whatever it might be. So you're getting the best of both worlds. And that really, with my research, came across as being, the solution that we as dental professionals needed for our careers. And that's kind of how, once I found that out, started looking through and talking with a couple different companies and finally found a company that had the science and the data and the all the literature and the patents behind it to really put a good name to them and be able to then develop something for us as dental professionals, and that's how that product came about.
So up till me meeting you, obviously I knew that hearing was an issue, hearing loss was an issue in dentistry, but it's not something that's really talked about as much. It's almost like analogy with me was when concussions were a problem in the NFL and things were being ignored. And then, boom, there was a huge change in the direction of the industry. And everybody was aware of how bad concussions are in the NFL. So is this more of something we're just being ignorant? We're not paying attention. Is it getting the story out there? Is it like how do you get some momentum in this space?
Yeah, that's a great question. And really, as I said, I've been doing this since 2014, and that's been the biggest challenge. the same way you mentioned with the concussions. I going into it, I thought, hey, the ADA is to blame. They never told us. And then I found articles back from the 70s that they had written talking about this. So it's not an issue of it not having been mentioned. It's more an issue of it not really having been pushed, hasn't been given much attention. Like I said, it's not sexy. It's easy to talk about some, awesome new software or new 3D printer or new scanner that's out there and the thousands of dollars it's going to generate for your practice. But, who wants to talk about, losing your hearing and protecting that? So that's part of it. But, the flip is our hearing it's one of our five senses. So it's one of those things where once it's gone, it's gone. It's not coming back. And, who would want to go blind? Who would want to, not be able to smell or taste? And, if we could do something to prevent that, I mean, we would. But why then are we not doing something to protect ourselves from going deaf, which, again, we all know is an issue and is something that's happening to us. So there's just been a big disconnect in terms of putting two and two together, making people aware. Like I said, I think we accepted it for too long as just being a side effect of what we do for a living and not understanding that we could actually completely prevent that from happening. And so that's kind of been during these 8 years, I've done my best. You name some of the major conferences, I've lectured at them, the Hinman, the Yankee. I've written, I don't know how many articles in some of the major dental publications that everyone's familiar with. Talking about the subject, dental economics, dentistry today. I mean, you name it. It's not that there hasn't been a push, even from the hygiene side. Now I'm starting to work more with the RDH community and really getting the word out with them. But it's more of a need of a sustained message and really, possibly having something big happen, like you mentioned with the concussions, where suddenly it blew the door open. It might realistically require something like that. And the best analogy I like to give people is thinking about loops. And, 20 years ago, if we were doing this podcast and we were talking about using dental loops, we'd be like, what is this stuff? Like, none of our friends or family or prior generations needed it. So, what do I need it for? And, these are big and they're heavy and they're, annoying me and they're causing me, aggravation. But you look at it nowadays and it's standard of care. And, they're not preventing you from going blind. There's no actual health benefit to it. It's just helping you, see things better and ergonomically, hopefully not strain your neck and your back as much. But now it goes from, hesitance to everybody not, batting an eye to drop, $3,000 to basically buy some, magnification. And so looking at how that evolved, my hope and my goal and what I've been pushing this time is hopefully we get to a point where people hear about ear protection and think, well, I don't know about this, and well, let me think about it. And then it reaches a point where it's like, oh my God, yeah, this is a no-brainer. This is actually saving one of my five senses. So that's the direction I hope it goes.
Gotcha. I think your company was acquired by another company who rebranded the product. How do they find out about this particular product if they wanted to learn more about it?
Yeah, currently there's a company called Forward Science. They're based out of Houston, Texas. A lot of dentists might be familiar with them. They've done a lot of like the oral ID and oral diagnosis products. They've been really on the forefront of that. They came across the product a couple of years ago and had interest in it. So they are the company right now that is currently selling those. So they only have, honestly, a certain amount left. They've gone through, obviously, the bunch of the inventory. They only have a certain amount left. So it's definitely right now is the time if you're wanting to look into the ear aid. And, we'll see from there, evolution-wise, what'll be kind of the next thing in terms of a product that, I'll try and work on and keep the conversation going.
Do you think this will continue to become more of an issue if it's still, I don't want to say ignored, but like you said, everybody buys loops and they drop it and they don't need loops to practice dentistry. Do you think this will continue to become a problem?
I do.
Or things will get better over time with other adjuncts that are made? What's your thoughts on the industry when it comes to that?
Yeah, I honestly think it's going to continue to be a problem. And actually, if you look at some of the literature that I present on, it's actually a much bigger problem now because, within the field, not much has changed. High speeds are high speeds, ultrasonics are ultrasonics. They're not getting any quieter. But then what we always have to keep in mind is what we're doing outside of our professional 9 to 5. And when you start tying that in, we're actually in a lot worse shape now than we were before because of the technology. So you think of just iPods, for example. I mean, those didn't exist 15, 20 years ago. And you look at the street, walking on the street now, and everyone's got them in their ears. And what are we doing? Well, we're listening to something. We're blasting music at the gym. We're going to concerts more, or we're at sporting events that are just getting louder and louder. I mean, a good football or basketball game is all about, distracting the other team. And you're doing that by screaming as loud as you can and making as much noise as you can. So, what we're doing outside of our 9 to 5 is actually a lot worse today. The literature has found that kids are starting to get hearing damage at a much younger age, this generation, than they ever were in the past. So I actually think this problem with time is actually going to get significantly worse, which again puts that much more of the onus on us to try and address it.
It's funny you said that because I have AirPods and I have them in my ear whenever I talk on the phone. But whenever I fly, I have them in my ears and I blast music because I don't want to hear the other annoying things that, that like torture you when you're on a flight, kids crying or someone making noise next to you. So I literally have them in my ears. So every so often I'll get an alert from my phone that tells me my music's playing too loud. I need to lower the decibels or I can have hearing loss because of it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So
there you go. That's it right there.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. All right, so let's transition. Let's talk about the financial aspect of things, the financial survival guide for dentists, the book that you wrote. So obviously, to me, when we spoke, I was kind of surprised at hearing that you wrote a book about that. So why don't you talk about the book, talk about what you talk about in the book, give a background on where we stand with financial aspect of things for these new graduates and even dentists who are been in practice for a long time. They're still having some major financial issues.
Yeah, I think really the genesis of that was graduating dental school, starting to practice and realizing, all right, I know how to do an MOD and, I know how to do some dentistry, but I have no clue from a business standpoint how to run my life. I don't know what to do about the loans and what the best way is. I'd never heard of a corporation. When I hear the word corporation, I'm thinking of a 50-story high rise and some corporate office, and little do I know, as an individual, you can set up a corporation in your own name, and that can bring about all sorts of benefits from, savings to tax benefits, et cetera. So the long story short is there was so many things I, realized that we were never educated on. And it was really trying to write a book that would bring everything together in one place and give the new grad, whether it's student loans, the corporation, contracts, going over all the different insurances that we need and how they work and what the different types are and what questions to ask. I mean, it's really kind of an all-in-one guide, and that's why we call it financial survival. And our little, symbol on the cover of the book is a Swiss Army knife with different type of dental tools coming out of it, and it's trying to really tell the new grad, hey, you get this, you read this, you have this kind of as a book you have on your shelf anytime you need to refer to it, and you're going to have the ability to now start your career on the right foot and not have to learn things the hard way. And that's really what it comes down to. We've all had to learn through trial and error, and it's been, in a lot of cases, very costly trial and error, and it doesn't have to be that way. So that's kind of why I wanted to write that book.
What do you think are obviously student loans are a big problem right now. Going to dental school without having some financial means, you're going to be, have significant debt when you come out of school, which obviously we talked about was being a hindrance. So can you talk about some of the other financial things that, you think that dentists need to pay attention to, whether they're new graduates, whether they're in practice for a while? Where do you find that the most important things that they need to pay attention to?
Yeah, I mean, for the new grads, I mean, we hit it, student loans, I mean, you're going to have them. That's not the problem. It's just understanding your options of how to repay them. And that's really literally the $1 million question, and understanding interest and how the interest payback can really make your life difficult and how to deal with that. Understanding contracts, really appreciating what restrictive covenants is, and what your, pay structure is, whether it's collection or production, what that means and how that plays a role. The insurance stuff, like we talked about, we really try and explain to people from a retirement standpoint how to start saving early and how much of a difference it makes, even if it's $100 only a month. People think, well, shoot, that's not going to get me far, but they don't realize that the earlier you start that, it actually exponentially puts you ahead. So really trying to put out those lessons. So I think more from a new grad standpoint, it's really trying to push understanding your options, your insurance, saving money in retirement, and how to pay back the debt that you have. I think more for practicing dentists, and again, being an independent periodontist, I don't really speak so much in terms of practice ownership, because that obviously wouldn't be a place I would have much personal experience to draw on, but really more from a patient acceptance standpoint, being a periodontist and having cases that are pretty involved and have pretty, big treatment plans that can be costly. I think a lot of times we run into issues where, one challenge is trying to explain the treatment and try and have patients want to do the treatment. Obviously, they're hesitant and they're scared, and then you throw in the costs. But then the other problem is, you have patients sometimes that actually want to do the treatment, but they can't afford it, or they wait for everything based off of their insurance. Like, okay, I want to do these few teeth, but why don't we do one a year? And it's like, well, you've got these gigantic infections there and you've got a huge abscess. Like, you can't wait and do this, once per year. So I think for, the dental professional from that standpoint, there's a lot of new companies out there that are offering, finance solutions. We always talk about Care Credit. That's the one everybody knows about. But, there's a great new group out there called Sunbit that I've been working with now for a little bit. They offer financing solutions that really are kind of a level up from Care Credit. The amount of patient acceptance that you're going to get is significantly higher. So you think about the cases that are turned down and the patient no longer wants to go forward. To be able to get financing through that will literally, save you thousands and get you a lot more treatment that's out there. There's also new companies out there that are offering, membership-based programs. I've started talking and just started working with one called PlanRise. There's a few of them, but I'm throwing that name out there for people to hear. And it's really helping as another alternative solution to insurances. We've had our hands tied down to the insurance companies, and it seems like we're more and more at their mercy. And, these companies have come out and offered these membership-based programs that are now allowing offices to basically have their own kind of in-house program. So they can start offering patients similar amounts of coverage without being beholden to what the insurance says. There's nothing worse than a patient wanting to do a crown or an implant, but then there being, some missing tooth clause that's not allowing them to get covered, which is ridiculous. If a patient's missing a tooth and they want to have it restored, what difference does it make if they've missed a tooth, 20 years ago or not? They want to have treatment and they want to, take care of their oral health. So I think companies like that are out there. They certainly didn't exist until pretty recently. And I think for the dental professional, especially the office owners, looking into these patient finance companies and starting to see that there are solutions out there that can really save them a lot of money and get a lot more work for them, I think is something worth them, investing into.
So, Sam, I think I told you, I'm not sure when we met, but I have a workshop I do called The Art of Dental Financing, where I talk about financing companies, when to use them, which ones are the best for certain situations. So I'm a huge fan of Sunbit. I highly recommend Sunbit. Not that I'm not a fan of Care Credit. Care Credit is the behemoth. Everybody uses them, but unfortunately they're not the solution for every practice or every patient. So they need fallback options, and Sunbit is a great one. They approve like 85%. They go to a credit score of lower than or at 500 or better. They're approved. So I think Sunbit's an amazing product. You mentioned the membership plans. I'm a fan of PlanRise. I've had Leslie on my podcast before, so we have some synergy there. For those that are looking to have a management or a membership plan managed, PlanRise is a great option for you as well. So just throwing that out there, that Sam and I are in agreement there on those couple of products that can help you with that.
And I think we're in alignment too, talking about not just from the patient standpoint. Now talk about staffing. The biggest issue, and I've been working in several practices currently and over the years, and so I've had a lot of exposure to every kind of realm, private, DSOs, specialty only. I've kind of been in everything. And the biggest problem now since COVID is staffing. It's getting having hygienists, having assistants, having front desk, and there's been a huge turnover due to COVID and all the employment and payment and stuff involved with that, and that's been a huge one. So, I know you're familiar and you've worked with cloud, and they're another solution that's out there where you can really work with them and really get a direct source of whether it be an assistant, a hygienist, and they've got references, they've got all their paperwork, they've got everything in all in one place. And that's the biggest thing here, at least in Boston. I mean, patients are one thing, but the offices are scrambling to find temps, and it's been a huge problem. So companies like that, like a cloud that you can even speak to better than I can, it's another example of the solutions that are out there now that weren't before, that can really make everyone's life significantly easier.
I think the future of dentistry is bright because of the products that I've actually seen a lot of products lately, a lot of new products that are coming out that I'm blown away with. And I'm not the owner of my practice anymore. I bring stuff in to the practice. I'm not sure I'll be clinically practicing past July of 2023. But I'm excited for the future of dentistry because of what's out there. And Cloud is a sponsor of my podcast, and I'm very familiar with their platform. And again, another great way to find temporary help for your office. So check out Cloud when you can as well. Before we kind of find out how to get a copy of your book or how to find out more information, I want to switch gears for a second here. We'll spend a couple minutes doing. Sam picked a deck called Would You Rather, and we haven't done Would You Rather in a while, which is really good. So we're going to ask Sam some questions. Sam, what you got to do here is lightning round fast, what you pick and why. You don't have to go into long-winded answers. Okay?
Okay. Sounds good.
And this is really funny because I read your bio. Okay. Would you rather watch a soccer game or a baseball game?
Definitely a soccer game. European, preferably.
Yeah. So you mentioned you're a fan of Real Madrid. So when I saw that question, I said, that's really funny. So, okay. Would you rather talk to dead people or be able to predict when people are going to die? Not a good question there. That's a terrible question.
Gosh, that's too heavy here. Holy cow. All right. I'd say I'd predict when they're going to die.
Okay. Would you rather, this is a food question. Would you rather eat fruit roll-ups or gummy bears? Terrible.
Oh God. I don't like either of them. I'd say the gummy bears because I can get it over with quicker. Okay.
All right. We both travel a lot. Would you rather have your flights delayed or always be seated by annoying people on a plane?
Oh, wow. No, you know what? I'll take the delay.
Yeah, I can't stand sitting next to someone who shakes their leg and they're constantly like moving around. Very annoying on the plane. I just put my AirPods in.
How long the flight is, but yeah, if it's a longer flight, man, you don't want to have anything to do with it.
Here's an interesting question. Would you rather live in an area where there are lots of tornadoes or earthquakes?
Well, I grew up in Southern California, so I grew up with earthquakes. So I've been through quite a bit of the big ones. That one during the World Series was felt all the way down south, even though it was in San Francisco. Got the Northridge one. I've been through all of them. So I would say earthquakes because at least I'm familiar with them.
Okay. Would you rather watch your TV shows as they air or binge watch your shows?
Definitely as they air. I'm a one episode at a time.
Okay. All right. Would you rather be a local news anchor or a national weather forecaster?
You know what? We joke about this at work. I'd say national weather forecaster because I could basically be wrong every day and it still doesn't matter.
That's great. That's great. Here's an interesting, this is one I like to ask everybody. So I finally got up to it. So would you rather not be able to use your apps on your phone or not use a search engine?
Gosh, I'm not great with tech anyway, so I would say not use the apps on the phone.
So you need to use your search engines?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's an interesting one. Would you rather always have a runny nose or ringing in your ear?
Oh, there you go. Well, no, runny nose for sure, because that's an easy solution. The hearing, you're screwed, like we talked about.
Yeah. Okay. Last one. Would you rather drive a Mercedes-Benz or a BMW?
Oh, I'm an SUV guy, so I'm trying to think if they're SUVs, which one I'd rather. I'd say Mercedes at the end.
Okay. All right. And there's one more that came up, which is interesting. Would you rather live on the East Coast or the West Coast? You've done them both.
Yeah, done both of those. Well, you know what? I'm here on the East Coast, so I guess I'd have to say by default, I chose East.
Okay. All right. All right. So thank you for having a little fun there. So Sam, why don't you let people know how they can reach out to you if they're interested in getting a copy of the book? What's the best way for them to do that? Give your information to them.
Yeah, sure. So the best way to get the book, it's through all the major publishers out there, but the easiest one, of course, is Amazon. So if you just go on Amazon, it's available both in the hard copy, but it's also available as an ebook. So if you're a Kindle person or prefer it that way, that's the easiest way. So just hop on Amazon for that. To get in touch with me, a couple different places. My personal website you can reach out is www.drsamshamardi.com. All up to one there. Social media wise, I finally have somewhat started getting involved with the whole Instagram thing. My handle is at Dr. Sam Shamardi, so easy way to reach me on there. So that's probably the best of all of them.
Okay, awesome. Well, Sam, this was really great information on hearing loss and dealing with some financial issues that our colleagues are dealing with. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Guys, if you like the episode, please share it. Please let them know about it. Please subscribe to our podcast or my podcast. You have any questions for me, you know how to reach out to me. And as I always like to end these podcasts, remember, your reputation matters. Sam, thanks again for joining me, and we'll speak to everyone soon.